The morning sun hadn't yet burned through San Francisco's fog when Jordan Cross stepped out of her Tesla onto the rain-slicked pavement outside the Marriott Marquis. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from a decade of making impossible decisions and living with the consequences. At 42, she'd built Meridian Tech from a garage startup into a company worth $300 million. Or at least, it had been worth that much before the board started whispering about quarterly losses and investor confidence. Welcome back, my beautiful family. I'm so glad you're here. If you're new or just haven't yet, please subscribe and like this video, it makes a huge difference. And I'd love to connect with you, so drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Your support keeps this channel going strong. Now, let's jump into today's story. She smoothed the front of her charcoal Armani suit and checked her reflection in the lobby's glass doors. Every hair in place. Every detail controlled. That's how Jordan had always operated, with precision, with certainty, with an unwavering belief that hard work and intelligence could solve any problem. It's what had gotten her here, after all. A black woman leading a major tech firm in Silicon Valley wasn't a story of luck. It was a story of being twice as good, working twice as hard, and never, ever showing weakness. The hotel lobby buzzed with the controlled chaos of a tech conference. Entrepreneurs in hoodies mingled with venture capitalists in bespoke suits. Jordan had attended dozens of these events, had closed deals over breakfast meetings and handshake agreements that would later be worth millions. Today, though, she wasn't here for networking. She was here for survival. Meridian Tech was bleeding money. A failed product launch 6 months ago had cratered their stock price. Their lead engineer had defected to a competitor, taking half the development team with him. And now their primary investor was pulling out, leaving them with a funding gap that could sink the company within the quarter. Jordan had spent the last 3 weeks in emergency meetings, burning through every contact in her phone, calling in every favor she'd accumulated over the years. It all came down to this morning. To this meeting. To a man named Thomas Brennan. She'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone in Silicon Valley had. Thomas Brennan was a legend, a self-made billionaire who'd built his fortune in logistics software before diversifying into venture capital. His portfolio read like a who's who of tech success stories. But Brennan was famously particular, known for his grueling due diligence process and his equally famous temper. He didn't suffer fools, didn't waste time on failing ventures, and absolutely didn't do second chances. Jordan had exactly one shot at this. She made her way through the lobby toward the Starbucks kiosk near the elevators, needing caffeine before the 10 o'clock meeting that would determine her company's fate. The barista handed her a double espresso, and she was turning away when she nearly collided with someone. "Excuse me," she said automatically, stepping back. The man was older, perhaps in his mid-60s, with silver hair and a weathered face that suggested years spent outdoors rather than in boardrooms. He wore faded jeans, work boots that had seen better days, and a flannel shirt that looked like it had come from a discount store. A canvas messenger bag hung from his shoulder, worn at the edges and patched with duct tape. "No problem," he said with a slight smile, his voice carrying a hint of a southern accent. "Crowded morning." Jordan nodded politely and moved past him, her mind already back on the presentation she'd rehearsed 100 times. The funding proposal was solid. The recovery plan was aggressive but achievable. She just needed Brennan to see past the current losses to the potential that still existed. She needed him to believe in Meridian the way she still did. She found a leather armchair in a quiet corner and pulled out her tablet, reviewing the slides one more time. Revenue projections. Market analysis. Competitive positioning. Everything was there, everything was perfect. It had to be Miss Cross. Jordan looked up to find a young woman in a crisp blue suit standing beside her chair. The woman held a tablet and wore the kind of professional smile that came standard with expensive corporate training. Yes. I'm Rebecca Chen, Mr. Brennan's executive assistant. I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Mr. Brennan's flight from New York was delayed due to weather. He won't be able to make the 10 o'clock meeting. The words hit Jordan like ice water. Delayed? When will he arrive? We're hoping by early afternoon, but it's uncertain. I wanted to let you know personally rather than leave you waiting. Rebecca's expression was genuinely apologetic. Mr. Brennan asked me to convey his regrets and to see if you might be available for dinner this evening instead. 7 o'clock at Quince. Dinner. A formal dinner meeting at one of the city's most expensive restaurants. It could be good, more time to build rapport, to present Meridian's case in a less rushed environment. Or it could be a polite brush-off, the kind of courtesy meeting that wealthy investors gave to losing propositions before letting them down easy. Jordan forced herself to smile. Of course. 7 o'clock works perfectly. Wonderful. I'll send you the confirmation details. Rebecca tapped something on her tablet. And Ms. Cross. Mr. Brennan mentioned he's very interested in what you've built. He doesn't take meetings lightly, especially not dinner meetings. I think that's a good sign. After Rebecca left, Jordan sat back in the chair and let out a slow breath. 9 hours. 9 hours to fill before the most important meeting of her career. She could go back to the office, but the thought of fielding questions from her anxious team made her stomach clench. She could return home, but her empty apartment with its view of the bay would only remind her of what she stood to lose. Instead, she stayed in the lobby, watching the conference attendees flow past, making calls, sending emails, doing anything to keep her mind occupied and her anxiety at bay. Around noon, Jordan decided she needed food, even though her stomach was in knots. She made her way to the hotel restaurant, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Market Street. The hostess seated her at a small table near the window, and she ordered a salad she knew she probably wouldn't finish. That's when she saw him again. The man from the lobby, the one in the flannel shirt and work boots, was sitting 3 tables away, alone with a burger and a beer, reading something on a battered iPad. Out of place among the conference attendees and business travelers, like someone's uncle who'd wandered in from a fishing trip. Jordan felt a small pang of something that might have been empathy. She remembered what it felt like to be out of place, to not quite fit the mold. Her first tech conference, 15 years ago, she'd been the only black woman in a sea of white men in suits. She'd worn her one good business outfit and carried a notebook because she couldn't afford a laptop. She'd felt every stare, every dismissive glance, every assumption that she was someone's assistant rather than a founder with a promising startup. She'd promised herself then that once she made it, once she had power and position, she'd be different. She'd see people for who they were, not what they looked like. But somewhere along the way, between the successful exits and the corner office and the profile in Forbes, that promise had gotten buried under the weight of quarterly earnings and market share and the constant pressure to prove herself in a world that still questioned whether she belonged at the table. Jordan finished her salad, or rather, pushed it around her plate for 20 minutes, and returned to her corner in the lobby. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. She took 3 calls with her CFO, reviewed the presentation slides for the dozenth time, and tried not to think about what would happen if Brennan said no. If Brennan said no, Meridian would fold within 60 days. 200 employees would lose their jobs. The technology they'd developed, genuinely innovative work in AI-assisted supply chain management, would be sold off in pieces to their competitors. And Jordan herself? She'd be another cautionary tale. Another example of a startup that burned bright and fast before flaming out. She couldn't let that happen. At 6:15, Jordan went to the restroom to freshen up, checking her appearance with the same meticulous attention she'd given it that morning. Perfect. Professional. Unshakable. That's what Brennan needed to see. Quince was a 10-minute drive from the hotel, located in a beautifully restored brick building in Jackson Square. Jordan arrived at precisely 6:55, early enough to show respect, not so early as to appear desperate. The maitre d' confirmed her reservation and led her to a private corner table where she could see the entire dining room. She ordered sparkling water and waited. 7 o'clock came and went. At 7:15, Jordan's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, running 20 minutes behind. Mr. Brennan apologizes for the delay. 20 minutes turned into 30. Jordan ordered another water and tried to ignore the sympathetic glances from the waitstaff. At 7:45, a man entered the restaurant. Not Thomas Brennan. The man from the lobby. Flannel shirt guy. Except now he wore a crisp white button-down and dark slacks, though the worn messenger bag still hung from his shoulder. And he was walking directly toward her table. Jordan felt confusion bloom into irritation. Was this some kind of mistake? Was he lost? Ms. Cross, the man said, extending his hand. I apologize for keeping you waiting. Traffic from the airport was worse than expected. Jordan stared at him, her brain struggling to process what was happening. I'm sorry, I think there's been some confusion. I'm meeting someone. Thomas Brennan, the man said, his expression unreadable. We've actually met twice today already. Once at the coffee kiosk this morning, and again at lunch. Though you didn't seem to recognize me either time. The world tilted slightly. Jordan felt heat creeping up her neck as the pieces fell into place. The man in the flannel shirt. The man she'd barely glanced at, had dismissed as irrelevant, had literally looked past as if he weren't there. That man was Thomas Brennan. The billionaire investor who held her company's future in his hands. And she'd ignored him completely. What would you do if you discovered you'd dismissed the one person who could save everything you'd worked for? How would you recover from that kind of mistake? Jordan's mouth went dry. She stood automatically, muscle memory taking over when her brain couldn't quite catch up. Mr. Brennan. I didn't realize. I know. He gestured to the chair across from her. May I? She nodded, sinking back into her own seat as he settled across the table. Up close, she could see the intelligence in his eyes, the assessment happening behind that calm exterior. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was a test she'd already failed. I apologize, Jordan began, her voice steadier than she felt. I should have. Brennan held up a hand. Let me save us both some time, Ms. Cross. I don't dress like what people expect a billionaire to look like. I do it deliberately. Been doing it for 30 years now. He opened the messenger bag and pulled out that same battered iPad she'd seen at lunch. You know what I've learned in those 3 decades? Jordan shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. People reveal themselves when they think you don't matter. When they think you can't do anything for them or to them. He tapped the screen, pulling up something she couldn't see from her angle. At the coffee kiosk this morning, you said, "Excuse me," like you were apologizing to a piece of furniture. At lunch, you looked right past me. Twice. Like I wasn't even there. The words were delivered without malice, which somehow made them worse. Jordan felt the weight of truth settling over her shoulders like a physical thing. He was right. She had looked past him. Had dismissed him entirely because he didn't fit her mental image of who Thomas Brennan should be. "I don't have an excuse," she said finally. "You're right. I was so focused on this meeting, so worried about making the right impression, that I stopped seeing people. I stopped seeing you." Interesting phrasing. Stopped seeing. Like it's something you used to do. Brennan leaned back in his chair as a waiter appeared to take their drink orders. He ordered whiskey, neat. Jordan asked for wine she wouldn't taste. When the waiter left, Brennan continued. "I read your story, you know. Before I agreed to this meeting. Jordan Cross, first in her family to go to college. Full scholarship to Stanford. Graduated top of her class in computer science. Started Meridian in a garage with 2 other founders who you eventually bought out. Made your first million at 31, your first 100 million at 38. Jordan listened, wondering where this was going. The biographical details were accurate, matter of public record. They'd been repeated in every profile, every interview she'd given over the years. "What interested me most," Brennan said, "was an interview you gave to TechCrunch about 5 years ago. You talked about how you'd been underestimated your entire career. How investors would direct their questions to your white male co-founders even though you were the CEO. How you walked into rooms and people assumed you were there to serve coffee, not make decisions worth millions." He met her eyes directly. "You said, and I quote, 'I promised myself that when I had power, I'd use it to see people others overlooked. To give chances to people who deserved them, not just people who looked the part.'" The quote hit Jordan like a slap. She remembered that interview, remembered the passion she'd felt when she'd said those words. She'd meant them. She truly meant them. "What happened to that person?" Brennan asked quietly. Jordan opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she say? That the pressures of running a major company had changed her. That success had made her forget what struggle felt like. That she'd been so consumed with saving Meridian that she'd become exactly the kind of person she'd once despised. "I don't know," she said finally, and the honesty in those 3 words felt like breaking open. "I don't know when I stopped being her." The waiter returned with their drinks. Brennan ordered the duck. Jordan ordered something she'd forget the moment the waiter walked away. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of revelation hanging between them. "Here's what I think happened," Brennan said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You got successful. You got powerful. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that your success proved you were better than other people. Smarter. More deserving. You forgot that luck and privilege play a role, even for people who work hard." Jordan wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. She had started believing that. Had started thinking that people in expensive suits at tech conferences mattered more than people in flannel shirts. Had stopped seeing individuals and started seeing categories, useful and not useful, relevant and irrelevant. "My father was a mechanic," Brennan said. "Worked on cars for 40 years in a small town in Tennessee. Never made more than $30,000 a year. But he was the smartest man I ever knew. Could diagnose an engine problem by sound, could fix anything with his hands, could read people better than any executive I've met since." He took a sip of whiskey. "He taught me that clothes don't tell you anything important about a person. That kindness costs nothing and means everything. And that the moment you start thinking you're better than someone else, you've already lost something valuable. Jordan felt something cracking inside her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. Not just sorry she'd blown the meeting, but sorry she'd become someone who needed this lesson in the first place. "Sorry's a start," Brennan acknowledged. "But it's not enough. Not for me, and not for the 200 people working for you who'll lose their jobs if Meridian folds." There it was. The reality she'd been dancing around all day. "You've made your decision, then." "I have." Brennan set down his glass. "But maybe not the one you're expecting." Jordan's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd prepared herself for rejection, had steeled herself for the humiliation of returning to her board empty-handed. But uncertainty was somehow worse. It left her suspended between hope and despair, unable to find solid ground. "I'm listening," she managed. Brennan pulled a folder from his messenger bag, actual paper, she noted, not a digital file, and laid it on the table between them. "I've been watching Meridian for 6 months. Long before your current crisis. Your AI supply chain technology is genuinely innovative. Your team, at least the ones who haven't left yet, are talented. And your market positioning, despite recent setbacks, is salvageable." Jordan felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. "Then you see the potential." "I see the potential," Brennan confirmed. "What I don't see is leadership capable of realizing it." The words landed like a physical blow. Jordan's spine stiffened. "With all due respect, Mr. Brennan, I've built this company from nothing. I've navigated challenges that would have sunk most startups. One bad quarter doesn't erase a decade of success." "You're right. It doesn't." Brennan opened the folder, revealing what looked like financial documents. "But 3 bad quarters does. And the pattern I'm seeing isn't just about numbers. It's about judgment." He slid a page across to her. Jordan recognized it immediately, an internal memo she'd sent 4 months ago, rejecting a proposal from her VP of operations to pivot their product strategy. The VP had been proved right. The memo had been leaked to the board as evidence of Jordan's increasingly rigid decision-making. "How did you get this?" Jordan asked. "I do my homework. Always." Brennan tapped another document. "Here's another one. An exit interview from your head of HR, who quit after you overruled her diversity hiring initiatives because you said you needed proven talent, not social experiments." Jordan winced. She remembered that conversation, remembered the frustration she'd felt when pressed to consider candidates from non-traditional backgrounds. She'd told herself it was about efficiency, about hiring the best people quickly. But looking at it now, through Brennan's eyes, she could see how it looked. How it was. "And here," Brennan continued, pulling out a third document, "is a complaint from a junior developer who said you dismissed his innovative approach to a coding problem because he was fresh out of community college, not Stanford or MIT like the rest of your senior team." "You're painting me as some kind of elitist," Jordan said, hearing the defensiveness in her own voice. "I'm painting you as someone who forgot where she came from," Brennan corrected. "And that's worse, because you should know better. You've experienced being underestimated, being dismissed, being judged by surface-level criteria instead of substance. Yet here you are, doing exactly that to others." The food arrived, but Jordan couldn't imagine eating. Her appetite had disappeared entirely, replaced by a sick feeling that had nothing to do with hunger. Brennan cut into his duck with precise movements. "I started with nothing too, you know. Dropped out of high school to help my mother when my father got sick. Worked construction, saved every penny, taught myself to code from library books. Built my first software company in a trailer park. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. Success can make you forget what it felt like to be invisible. To be counted out before you even started. So this whole thing, Jordan gestured between them, the casual clothes, watching me ignore you twice, this was all what? A test? Some kind of morality play? Call it whatever you want. I call it due diligence. Brennan met her eyes steadily. I don't invest in companies, Ms. Cross. I invest in people. And I need to know if the person I'm investing in is someone who can learn, who can grow, who can admit when they're wrong and do better. And your verdict? Still deciding. He pushed a document across the table, this one single page with his company letterhead. Here's my offer. $200 million in funding, enough to stabilize Meridian and fund your expansion plans for the next 3 years. Jordan's hand trembled as she reached for the paper. $200 million. It was more than she'd hoped for, more than she'd dared to ask. It would save everything. But, Brennan said, and Jordan's hand stopped midway to the document, it comes with conditions. Of course it did. Nothing was ever simple, especially not salvation. What conditions? Brennan leaned forward, his expression serious. First, you step down as CEO. The words hit Jordan like a freight train. What? No. Absolutely not. Meridian is my company. I built it. You're too close to it, Brennan interrupted. You're making decisions based on ego and fear, not strategy. You need perspective, and you can't get that from the CEO chair. Then what? You want me out completely? After everything I've done? I want you as Chief Innovation Officer, Brennan said. Focus on what you're actually brilliant at, technology and product development. Leave the business operations to someone with fresh eyes and better judgment. Someone who remembers how to see people. Jordan sat back, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. Step down as CEO. Give up control of the company she'd poured her life into. It was unthinkable. It was humiliating. It was exactly what Meridian needed. Who would you bring in? She asked quietly. I have someone in mind. Someone you know, actually. Brennan pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, then turned it toward her. Jordan stared at the photo of a woman in her late 30s, smiling at a corporate event. Recognition hit immediately. Tanya Morrison. She was your VP of operations until you forced her out 8 months ago. The name alone was enough to make Jordan's jaw tighten. Tanya Morrison. Brilliant, innovative, impossible Tanya Morrison, who'd questioned every decision Jordan made, who'd challenged her in meetings, who'd gone over her head to the board with concerns about company direction. Jordan had pushed her out, not fired exactly, but made it clear she had no future at Meridian unless she fell in line. Tanya had resigned 3 weeks later. Taken a position at a competitor. And from what Jordan had heard through the Silicon Valley grapevine, she was thriving there. You can't be serious, Jordan said, her voice low and tight. Tanya Morrison hates me. She has good reason to, Brennan replied calmly. You undermined her at every turn, dismissed her ideas, and made her professional life miserable because she had the audacity to be right when you were wrong. She was insubordinate. She was honest. Brennan's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath it. She tried to warn you about the product launch that failed. She told you the timeline was too aggressive, that the technology wasn't ready. You ignored her and pushed forward anyway. How much did that mistake cost you? 60 million. 70. 83 million, actually, but Jordan wasn't about to admit that. Hindsight is always perfect, Mr. Brennan. We make decisions with the information we have at the time. Except you had the information. She gave it to you. You chose not to listen because it came from someone who made you uncomfortable. Brennan took another bite of his duck, completely at ease while Jordan felt like she was unraveling. Tanya Morrison has the experience, the vision, and the humility that Meridian needs right now. She also happens to be one of the few people in this industry who actually understands what your technology can do. Jordan pushed her untouched food around her plate, buying time to think. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to walk away from this insulting offer. Let Meridian die if that was the alternative to this humiliation. She'd built the company. She'd bled for it. And now Brennan wanted to hand it over to someone she'd fired. But there were 200 employees counting on her. People with families, with mortgages, with lives that would be upended if Meridian folded. Could she really let her pride destroy all of that? What are the other conditions? Jordan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Brennan pulled out another document. You'll remain on the board, but without voting rights for the first year. You'll work directly under Tanya as Chief Innovation Officer, reporting to her on all product decisions. You'll take a 60% pay cut from your current salary. Each condition felt like another knife between her ribs. No voting rights. Reporting to Tanya. A massive pay cut that would require her to sell her apartment, downsize her life, admit to everyone that she'd failed. And, Brennan continued, you'll undergo executive coaching focused on leadership development and unconscious bias. Weekly sessions for at least 6 months. Unconscious bias training. Jordan's laugh was bitter. I'm a black woman in tech, Mr. Brennan. I've been on the receiving end of bias my entire career. I don't need training on what it looks like. Clearly you do, Brennan said quietly, because you've spent the last 8 months perpetuating the same systems that tried to keep you down. Being a victim of bias doesn't make you immune to having biases of your own. It just makes you better at justifying them. The truth of it sat heavy in Jordan's chest. She thought about the junior developer from community college, the candidates from non-traditional backgrounds she'd rejected, the employees she'd dismissed because they didn't fit her narrow definition of what talent looked like. She'd become the gatekeeper, deciding who deserved a chance based on credentials and pedigree rather than potential and drive. She'd become everything she'd once fought against. If I agree to all of this, Jordan said slowly, what guarantee do I have that you won't just push me out entirely once the company stabilizes? You don't. Brennan's honesty was almost refreshing. You'll have to earn your place every single day, just like everyone else. No special treatment because you're the founder. No protection because of what you built in the past. You stay because you're valuable, not because of what you used to be. Jordan looked down at the contract lying between them. $200 million. The salvation of her company. The survival of 200 jobs. All she had to do was sign away her pride, her title, her control over the thing she loved most in the world. I need time to think, she said. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Brennan signaled for the check. I've got 3 other investments I'm considering. Meridian is my preference because of the technology and because I think there's still something worth saving here. But I'm not going to beg, and I'm not going to negotiate. These terms are final. He stood, leaving cash on the table for the meal neither of them had really eaten. Think carefully, Ms. Cross. Think about why you started Meridian in the first place. Think about whether it was about building something meaningful or about building a monument to yourself. And then decide if you love this company enough to let it grow beyond you. After he left, Jordan sat alone at the table for a long time, staring at the contract. The restaurant hummed with conversation around her, tech executives making deals, entrepreneurs chasing dreams, the endless churn of ambition and innovation that defines Silicon Valley. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Tanya Morrison's name. They hadn't spoken since Tanya's resignation. Jordan had told herself it was for the best, that Tanya would be happier somewhere else, that Meridian was better off without the constant friction. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. Jordan had pushed Tanya out because she'd been threatened by her, intimidated by someone who wasn't afraid to challenge her, who demanded excellence and accountability even when it was uncomfortable. Jordan had spent years fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be taken seriously. And the moment she'd achieved power, she'd used it to silence someone doing exactly what she'd done, speaking truth to power, demanding better, refusing to accept the status quo. The irony was almost unbearable. Jordan didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment overlooking the San Francisco Bay, watching the lights of the city shimmer on the dark water, the contract spread across her coffee table like an indictment. At 3 a.m, she opened her laptop and started reading through old emails. Messages from Tanya Morrison, carefully worded concerns about product timelines and market research. Jordan's responses were curt, dismissive. "I appreciate your input, but we're moving forward as planned. Let's discuss this later when you've had time to understand the full strategy. I need team players right now, not critics." She cringed reading her own words. Every message dripped with condescension, with the unspoken message that Tanya's opinions didn't matter, that Jordan knew best because she was the CEO, the founder, the one who'd built this company from nothing. Jordan clicked through to another folder. Exit interviews. The head of HR she'd pushed out. 2 senior developers who'd left for competitors. A project manager who'd resigned after Jordan publicly berated him in a meeting for suggesting a different approach to a client presentation. The pattern was undeniable. Jordan had surrounded herself with yes people, had systematically removed anyone who challenged her, anyone who threatened the image she'd built of herself as the visionary leader who always knew the right answer. She'd created a company culture where fear masqueraded as respect, where loyalty meant silence, where success was measured by how well you could anticipate what Jordan wanted to hear rather than what the company needed to know. At 5 a.m, Jordan pulled up Meridian's employee satisfaction surveys from the past 2 years. She'd barely glanced at them before, had delegated them to HR and assumed everything was fine because no one complained to her directly. Why would they? She'd made it clear that complaints weren't welcome. The numbers told a different story. Employee satisfaction had dropped 40% in 18 months. Turnover was up 67%. In the comments section, the same themes appeared over and over: leadership doesn't listen. Ideas from junior staff are ignored. If you don't have the right credentials, you're invisible here. The CEO has lost touch with what made this company great. Jordan closed the laptop and walked to her window. Dawn was breaking over the bay, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere out there, 200 people would be waking up, getting ready for work, trusting that she'd find a way to save their jobs. She thought about her father, who'd worked 2 jobs to put her through college. He'd been a janitor at a hospital and a night security guard at an office building. He'd never made more than $40,000 a year in his life, but he'd been the most dignified person Jordan had ever known. He'd treated everyone, doctors, nurses, executives, fellow custodians, with the same respect, the same genuine interest in their lives. A person's worth isn't in their title or their paycheck, he told her once. It's in how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Jordan hadn't thought about that conversation in years. Somewhere between Stanford and Silicon Valley, between startup founder and CEO, she'd forgotten that lesson. She'd started measuring people by what they could do for her, for Meridian. She'd stopped seeing them as individuals with their own dreams and struggles and value. She'd become exactly the kind of person her father had taught her never to be. At 7:30, Jordan showered and dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, not her usual power suit. She made coffee and sat back down with the contract. Read through every clause, every condition, every way in which signing this document would dismantle the life she'd built. Then she picked up her phone and called the one person whose opinion she trusted more than anyone's. Jordan. Her mother's voice was thick with sleep. "Honey, it's early. What's wrong?" "Everything, Mama." Jordan felt her throat tighten. "Everything's wrong, and I don't know how to fix it." "Tell me." So Jordan did. She told her mother about Meridian's financial crisis, about Thomas Brennan and his test she'd failed, about the contract that would save her company but cost her everything she'd worked for. She told her about Tanya Morrison and the employees she'd pushed out and the culture of fear she'd created without even realizing it. "I don't know if I can do this," Jordan admitted. "Sign away my company to someone I fired? Admit to everyone that I failed? Mama, I worked so hard to get here. To prove I belonged. To show everyone that a black woman from Oakland could build something that mattered." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Baby, do you remember what your father used to say about pride?" Jordan wiped at her eyes. "That it makes poor company when you're alone." "That's right. And you know what else he said? That real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about having the courage to get back up and admit you fell in the first place." "I'm scared, Mama." "I know, baby. But being scared means you're about to do something brave." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "Now let me ask you something. If you don't sign that contract, what happens?" "Meridian folds. 200 people lose their jobs. And if you do sign it, those 200 people keep their jobs. The company survives. And I have to face every day knowing that I wasn't good enough to lead it anymore." Or, her mother said, "You face every day knowing that you loved those 200 people more than you loved your pride. That you chose their welfare over your ego. That you were strong enough to admit when you needed help." She paused. "Which story do you want to tell your children someday, Jordan?" Jordan looked out at the bay, at the city waking up to another day of possibility and risk. She thought about her father, about the lessons she'd forgotten, about the person she'd been before success had hardened her into someone she barely recognized. She thought about Tanya Morrison, brilliant and brave, who tried to save Meridian even when Jordan had made her life miserable. About the junior developer from community college who'd probably had amazing ideas Jordan never bothered to hear. About all the people she'd looked past, dismissed, underestimated. About Thomas Brennan in his flannel shirt, invisible to her because she'd stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as categories. "I know what I have to do," Jordan said quietly. At 8:45, Jordan walked into Brennan's hotel suite. He was sitting at a desk by the window, working on his laptop, still in casual clothes, cargo pants and a pullover today. He looked up when she entered, his expression neutral. "Miss Cross. You're early. I'm ready to sign." Jordan set her bag on the chair and pulled out the contract, already marked with her annotations and questions. But I need to understand one thing first. Brennan closed his laptop and gave her his full attention. I'm listening. Why Tanya? I understand why you want me out of the CEO role. I've earned that. But there are dozens of qualified executives you could bring in. Why someone I hurt? Why make this personal? Brennan stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. You think this is about punishment? Isn't it? No. He turned to face her. It's about repair. Tanya Morrison isn't just qualified, she's exceptional. But more than that, she understands Meridian's culture, knows the team, and has already invested emotional labor into trying to make that company better. She deserves the chance to finish what she started. Jordan nodded slowly. And having me work under her? That's to teach me humility. That's to teach you partnership. Brennan's voice was firm but not unkind. You've spent years at the top, making unilateral decisions, insulated from feedback. You need to learn what it's like to collaborate with someone who has authority over you, who can say no to your ideas, who can push back without fear of retaliation. That's not humiliation, that's growth. Jordan walked to the window, standing beside him. The city spread out below them, millions of people pursuing their own dreams, fighting their own battles. I called Tanya last night. At 6 a.m. She didn't answer. She's in Boston at a conference. Probably had her phone off. I left a voicemail. Jordan's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. I apologized. For everything. For pushing her out, for dismissing her ideas, for making her feel like her contributions didn't matter. I told her that she was right about the product launch, right about the hiring practices, right about everything I was too proud to see. Brennan said nothing, just waited. I told her that if you offered her the CEO position, she should take it. That Meridian needs her, and that I would do whatever it takes to support her success, even if that means swallowing my pride every single day. Jordan's voice cracked slightly. I meant every word. That's a start, Brennan said. But words are easy. Actions are what matter. I know. Jordan pulled a pen from her bag. That's why I'm signing this. Not because I think I deserve redemption or because I expect forgiveness. I'm signing because 200 people deserve better than my ego, and because Meridian deserves a leader who hasn't forgotten how to listen. She moved to the desk and began signing each page of the contract, her hand steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Each signature felt like surrendering a piece of herself, like watching her identity as Jordan Cross, CEO and founder, dissolve into something smaller and more uncertain. When she finished, she slid the contract across to Brennan. There's one thing I'd like to add, if you'll allow it. What's that? The executive coaching you mentioned, I want to expand it. Not just for me, but for the entire leadership team. And I want to establish a mentorship program connecting senior staff with employees from non-traditional backgrounds. People like that community college developer I dismissed. Jordan met his eyes. I can't undo the culture I created, but maybe I can help dismantle it. Brennan picked up the contract, reviewing her signatures. You'd be funding this personally? Yes. I'm selling my apartment, downsizing. The money from that, plus what I'm saving from the pay cut, it should be enough to fund the program for at least 3 years. For the first time since they'd met, Brennan smiled. Not a big smile, but genuine. You're serious about this? I'm serious about becoming someone my father would be proud of again. Jordan's voice was quiet but firm. I lost my way, Mr. Brennan. I started believing that success meant I'd earned the right to stop growing, stop learning, stop questioning myself. But the truth is, the higher you climb, the more careful you need to be about staying grounded. Brennan pulled out his phone and made a call. Rebecca. Start the paperwork for the Meridian investment. Full terms as discussed. He paused. And call Tanya Morrison. Tell her I need to speak with her this morning. It's urgent. After he hung up, he extended his hand to Jordan. She took it, feeling the firmness of his grip, the calluses that spoke of his father's mechanic shop and his own years of hard work before success had smoothed some of those rough edges. This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done, Brennan said. Harder than starting Meridian, harder than your worst quarters, harder than anything you've faced. Because you're not just rebuilding a company, you're rebuilding yourself. I know. There will be people who won't forgive you. Employees who'll never trust you again. Board members who'll question every move you make. And Tanya, she may accept you as a colleague, but that doesn't mean she'll ever forget what you put her through. I know that too. Jordan squeezed his hand before releasing it. But I'd rather spend the rest of my career earning back trust one lost than spend it wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Brennan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then showed Jordan the screen. A text from Tanya Morrison, got Jordan's voicemail. What's going on? You ready for this? Brennan asked. Jordan took a deep breath, thinking about her father, about the 200 employees counting on her, about the person she wanted to become. No. But I'm doing it anyway. Good answer. Brennan began typing a response. Because ready or not, your new boss is about to call. The phone rang 3 minutes later. Brennan put it on speaker and set it on the desk between them. Jordan's heart hammered so hard she was certain it would be audible through the line. Thomas, what's this about? Tanya Morrison's voice was cautious, professional. I got a strange voicemail from Jordan Cross this morning, and now your assistant says it's urgent. Tanya, I'm here with Jordan now. Brennan gestured for Jordan to speak. She has something to tell you. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Jordan wondered if the call had dropped. Then, I'm listening. Jordan leaned toward the phone, her mouth dry. Tanya, I meant everything I said in that voicemail. I was wrong, about the product launch, about the hiring practices, about pushing you out. I was threatened by you because you were right when I needed to be right, and I couldn't handle that. Okay. Tanya's voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Thomas has offered to invest in Meridian. $200 million. Enough to save the company and fund our expansion. That's great news. Still neutral. Congratulations. There's more. Jordan forced herself to continue. One of his conditions is that I step down as CEO. He wants to bring in someone with fresh perspective, someone who can rebuild what I've damaged. He wants to bring in you. This time the silence was absolute. Jordan could hear her own breathing, the distant sound of traffic from the street below, the ticking of a clock somewhere in Brennan's suite. You're offering me your job, Tanya finally said, her voice tight with emotion Jordan couldn't quite read. The job you forced me to leave because I wouldn't rubber stamp your bad decisions. Yes. And you expect me to what? Be grateful. Fall over myself thanking you for the opportunity to clean up your mess. The anger in Tanya's voice was sharp and earned. Jordan closed her eyes. No. I expect you to be angry. You have every right to be. I'm not offering this as some kind of gift or favor. I'm telling you because Thomas has made it clear that Meridian's survival depends on leadership I can't provide anymore. And you're the best person for this job, whether I'm involved or not. Whether you're involved. Tanya let out a breath that might have been a laugh. So you're leaving entirely? No. Jordan opened her eyes, forcing herself to be honest even though every instinct screamed at her to protect herself. I'll be staying on as Chief Innovation Officer, reporting to you. Working under your direction on product development and technology strategy. Working under me. Now Tanya's laugh was real, bitter, and sharp. You've got to be kidding. Jordan, you made my life hell for 2 years. You undermined me in meetings, dismissed my concerns in front of the team, and then pushed me out when I wouldn't stop advocating for what the company needed. And now you want to work for me? I don't want to, Jordan admitted. Every part of my ego is screaming at me to walk away, to let Meridian die rather than face this. But those 200 employees don't deserve to lose their jobs because I'm too proud to admit I failed them. So yes, I'll work under you. I'll follow your direction. And I'll spend every single day proving that I've learned from my mistakes, even if you never believe me. Brennan spoke up for the first time. Tanya, you should know that Jordan has also proposed funding a leadership development program and mentorship initiative out of her own pocket. She's selling her apartment to make it happen. Jesus, Jordan. Tanya's voice shifted, some of the anger giving way to something else, maybe surprise, maybe confusion. This is really happening. This isn't some elaborate setup. It's happening. Jordan stared at the phone as if she could will Tanya to understand through sheer force of desperation. And I know I have no right to ask this, but I'm asking anyway. Come back to Meridian. Not for me, for the team we built together before I ruined it. For the technology that could change the industry if someone capable is leading it. For yourself, because you deserve the chance to show everyone what you can do without me standing in your way. The silence stretched again. Jordan could hear papers rustling on Tanya's end, the muffled sound of airport announcements in the background. I need time to think, Tanya said finally. This is a lot to process. Give me 24 hours. Of course, Brennan said. But Tanya? One more thing. I've been watching your work at Cortec. You've increased their operational efficiency by 34% in 8 months. You launched 2 products under budget and ahead of schedule. You're building exactly the kind of culture that Meridian needs. You've been watching me. Tanya sounded somewhere between flattered and unnerved. I told you, I do my homework. I knew I wanted you for this role before I ever contacted Jordan. This isn't about giving you a chance, Tanya. It's about recognizing that you're already one of the best operational leaders in the industry. Meridian would be lucky to have you. The question is whether we deserve you. After Tanya hung up, promising to call back within 24 hours, Jordan slumped into the chair. The adrenaline that had carried her through the conversation drained away, leaving her hollow and exhausted. She's going to say no, Jordan said quietly. Why would she come back to a place that treated her so badly? Maybe she will say no, Brennan agreed. That's her right. But I don't think she will. Why not? Because Tanya Morrison isn't motivated by revenge or vindication. She's motivated by the work itself, by the challenge of building something meaningful. And despite everything you did to make her life difficult, she still believes in what Meridian could be. Brennan closed his laptop and stood. The question isn't whether she'll take the job. It's whether you can handle what comes next. Jordan looked up at him. What comes next? The hard part. Showing up every day knowing you're not in charge. Taking direction from someone you used to boss around. Watching her make decisions you disagree with and having to trust her judgment over your own instincts. Brennan's expression was serious but not unkind. Redemption isn't a moment, Jordan. It's a process. And it's going to test you in ways you can't imagine. Jordan stood, gathering her things. Her hands were steadier now, her breathing more even. I spent 10 years building Meridian to prove I was good enough, smart enough, successful enough to belong in rooms where people looked like me weren't supposed to be. I thought that once I proved it, I'd be done. I'd have earned my place and could finally relax. And now? Now I realize that's not how it works. There's no finish line where you get to stop growing, stop learning, stop examining your own biases and blind spots. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment you start failing the people who depend on you. 22 hours later, Jordan sat in Meridian's conference room with her board of directors. She'd called an emergency meeting, and the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. 7 faces stared at her from around the polished table, investors, advisors, and the 3 remaining executives who hadn't jumped ship yet. You're stepping down. Richard Chen, her longest-serving board member, looked like she'd slapped him. Jordan, that's insane. You built this company. You are Meridian. No, I'm not. Jordan's voice was steady, even as her insides churned. That's been the problem. I started believing that Meridian couldn't exist without me at the helm, that every decision had to run through me, that anyone who disagreed with me was a threat. I was wrong. Patricia Williams, the board's financial advisor, leaned forward. Let me get this straight. Thomas Brennan will invest $200 million, but only if you step down and we bring in Tanya Morrison, the woman you fired, as CEO. I didn't fire her. I made it impossible for her to stay. There's a difference, but not one that matters. Jordan slid copies of the contract across the table. These are Brennan's terms. Non-negotiable. We accept them by tomorrow morning, or he walks and we fold within 60 days. This is humiliating, Richard said. For you and for this company. What will the industry say? What will our competitors think? They'll think we chose survival over pride, Jordan replied. And they'll be right. Michael Torres, her CFO, had been quiet until now. He picked up the contract, scanning through the pages. The terms are generous beyond the CEO change. $200 million at favorable rates, board seats for Brennan's firm, but no controlling interest. Technical debt forgiveness on our existing loans. This is better than anything else we've been offered. Because Brennan sees what I couldn't, Jordan said. He sees potential we're wasting because of my leadership failures. He sees a team that's been demoralized by a culture I created where fear mattered more than innovation. That's not fair, Patricia began. It's completely fair. Jordan pulled out a folder she'd prepared, the employee satisfaction surveys, the exit interviews, the internal complaints she'd ignored. I've spent the last day reading through these. Really reading them, not just skimming and dismissing them like I did before. Our turnover rate is 67% higher than it was 2 years ago. Employee satisfaction is in the basement. And the common thread in every complaint is me. She spread the documents across the table. I stopped listening. I stopped seeing people as individuals with valuable perspectives. I surrounded myself with people who agreed with me and pushed out anyone who challenged me, even when they were right. The room fell silent. Jordan watched their faces as they picked up the documents, scanning through the evidence of what she'd become. Some looked shocked. Others looked like they'd suspected but hadn't wanted to confront it. Tanya Morrison was right about the product launch, Jordan continued. She told me the timeline was too aggressive, that we needed more testing, that we were rushing to market to meet arbitrary deadlines I'd set because I couldn't admit I'd overcommit. I ignored her, and it cost us $83 million and destroyed our credibility with major clients. Richard set down the papers he'd been reading. Why are you doing this? Why not fight? Negotiate for better terms, stay on as CEO, bring in someone else to run operations? Because fighting is what got us here. Jordan met his eyes. I've been fighting my whole career, fighting to be taken seriously, fighting to prove I belonged, fighting to show that a black woman could build and run a major tech company. And somewhere in all that fighting, I forgot what I was fighting for. I became so focused on winning that I stopped caring about whether I deserved to win. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brennan, Tanya's calling in 5 minutes. Ready? Jordan's heart rate spiked, but she typed back, ready. There's something else you should know, Jordan said to the board. I'm funding a leadership development program and mentorship initiative personally. Selling my apartment, using the money to rebuild the culture I destroyed. If Tanya accepts this position, her first priority will be addressing the systemic issues in how we hire, promote, and value employees. That's admirable, Patricia said carefully, but it doesn't change the fact that you're asking us to approve your demotion and the installation of someone with no CEO experience at a critical juncture. Tanya has everything she needs except the title. She understands operations better than I ever did. She builds teams instead of tearing them down. And she has something I lost somewhere along the way, the ability to admit when she doesn't know something and ask for help. Jordan's phone rang. Brennan's name on the screen. She answered and put it on speaker. Thomas. Jordan. I have Tanya on the line. She's ready to give us her answer. The board members leaned forward, barely breathing. Jordan felt time slow down, felt the weight of 200 jobs and her own future balanced on whatever words would come next. I've thought about this carefully, Tanya's voice came through the speaker, clear and strong. I've talked to my family, my mentors, my therapist. And I've read through the proposal Jordan sent me this morning, the leadership development program, the mentorship initiative, the concrete steps for culture change. Jordan had sent that at 4 a.m., unable to sleep, desperate to show Tanya this wasn't just words but a real commitment to transformation. I have conditions of my own, Tanya continued. First, Jordan's role reports directly to me, no exceptions. Second, I want full authority over hiring and firing, including board-level positions if necessary. Third, the culture change program gets expanded, not just mentorship but comprehensive bias training, transparent promotion criteria, and regular third-party audits of our practices. Agreed, Brennan said immediately. And fourth, Tanya's voice softened slightly, Jordan and I meet weekly, one-on-one, with a professional mediator for at least 6 months. Not to rehash the past, but to build a working relationship based on honesty and accountability. Because if this is going to work, we both need to be able to speak truth to each other without fear. Jordan felt tears prick her eyes. Agreed. Then I accept, Tanya said. I'll start in 2 weeks. That gives me time to wrap up at Cortec and gives Jordan time to prepare the team for transition. The board erupted in questions, but Jordan barely heard them. She was staring at the phone, at Tanya's name on the screen, feeling something that might have been relief or grief or hope, maybe all three at once. She just signed away everything she'd built. And somehow, for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. 6 months had passed since the morning Jordan signed her old life away. The Meridian offices looked different now. The glass walls that once displayed only revenue graphs were covered in handwritten sticky notes from employees. "Thank you for listening, I stayed because I finally feel safe to speak, this place feels human again." The coffee stations no longer ran out by 10 a.m., someone had quietly budgeted for better beans and real milk. In the lobby, a framed photo from the last company picnic hung where Jordan's Forbes cover used to dominate, 200 people laughing under string lights, Tanya and Jordan in the middle, arms slung around each other like old friends instead of former enemies. Jordan still arrived before sunrise most days, but now she took the stairs instead of the private elevator. She wore jeans and sneakers, and her badge read Chief Innovation Officer, in the same font size as everyone else's. The first time a new intern called her Jordan instead of Ms. Cross, she almost cried in the supply closet. That Friday, the entire company gathered in the atrium for the quarterly all-hands. The room was fuller than it had been in 2 years, turnover had plummeted, and they just closed their biggest funding round since Brennan's rescue. Tanya stepped to the microphone first, radiant in a cobalt blazer, and ran through the numbers. Revenue up 42%, customer retention at an all-time high, 2 major product launches shipped on time and under budget. The applause was thunderous. Then Tanya did something no one expected. She turned and gestured Jordan forward. Jordan's heart tried to climb out of her throat. She had prepared remarks, but when she reached the podium, the note cards felt ridiculous. She set them face down. "I practiced a speech," she started, voice soft enough that the mic barely caught it. It was full of clever lines about resilience and growth. But the truth is simpler. She looked out at the sea of faces, the junior developer from community college now leading the AI ethics team, the HR director who'd come back after Jordan personally apologized and offered her old job plus a promotion, the security guard who used to flinch whenever Jordan walked past and now waved at her every morning. "I used to think success meant never having to say you're sorry," she said. "That if you were smart enough, fast enough, ruthless enough, you could outrun your mistakes. I was wrong. Some mistakes you have to walk back toward, slowly, in public, while everyone watches to see if you really mean it." A few people laughed, the gentle kind that comes with recognition. "I'm still walking," Jordan continued. "Some days I stumble. Some days I want to hide in my office and pretend I'm still the woman who knew everything. But every time I'm tempted to fall back into old habits, someone here reminds me, quietly, kindly, courageously, that we're building something better than one person's ego." She found Tanya in the front row, who gave her the smallest nod, the one that had taken 4 months of mediated conversations to earn. Jordan smiled, shaky but real. "So thank you. Thank you for staying when you had every reason to leave. Thank you for speaking up when I finally learned to shut up and listen. Thank you for letting me earn my place here again, one day, one idea, one apology at a time." The atrium went quiet for a single heartbeat, the kind of silence that holds its breath. Then the community college developer started clapping. The HR director joined. Within seconds the sound filled the entire space, loud and messy and alive. Jordan stepped back from the mic, eyes shining, and looked at Tanya. Tanya mouthed 2 words, "Welcome home." Jordan mouthed back, "Welcome home, boss." And for the first time in years, Jordan Cross felt the full weight of a room that wasn't looking past her, wasn't measuring her worth by her title or her net worth or the color of her skin. They were simply looking at her. And they stayed. If someone handed you a contract that saved everything you built but required you to step down and work for the person you'd hurt most, would your pride or your purpose win? Be honest. Tell us in the comments.
Thank you so much for watching. Your support truly means everything to me. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It only takes a second but helps immensely in bringing you more content like this. I've got another compelling video ready for you. Just click on it now to continue. See you in the next one.